Good evening. We are
Hi.
live.
Trying to get my camera right.
Welcome everybody to Blaze Boudoir. I am Mary Weber O'Malley and want to welcome you to a mighty Blaze Boudoir. I am the co-host. We are here the fourth Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Central. And tonight we are extremely excited to be welcoming Ava Leigh. Leigh. Ava Leigh.
Ava Leigh.
Ava Leigh. I was so worried getting your first name pronounced right. I'm a little flustered because I literally just walked in the door. My flight was delayed. I've been circling Chicago for about 45 minutes. So I'm really happy to be here. And as we get started, I just want to give you a few words about the Blaze. If you're new to A Mighty Blaze, we are a group of creatives who got together at the beginning of COVID to connect readers and authors. And we've continued to do that in the age of COVID and beyond. We are all professional volunteers. If you like what you see here, I would ask that you go to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere that you find A Mighty Blaze. Go there and like, subscribe. If you want to be up to date on all of our events, then head to our website, amightyblaze.com, and sign up for our newsletter. We have shows for every genre. We have poetry. We have Thoughtful Bro. We have Authors Love Bookstores. We have Friday Frontliners, and so much more. We have Crime Time with Hank Philippi Ryan. There's just always something going on here. So go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, and that way you will never miss an event. So a little about me. I am a writer and a virtual bookseller for Skylark Bookshop in Columbia, Missouri, reading and blurbing books across many genres. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Blurb Your Enthusiasm, where I talk all things books. Kate LeBeau, my co-host, is also my daughter, and she splits her time between reading romance, writing about romance, making memes about romance, hanging out with her husband and infant son, and she runs the blog Romantically Inclined Reviews and the Instagram Romantically Inclined and Romantically Inclined Memes. She reads all genres and heat levels, from proper romance to erotica and everything in between. And our guest tonight is Ava Leigh. Ava is a USA Today best-selling romance author who has always loved romance. She writes historical romance with determined women and men who will do anything for them. She enjoys baking, spending too much time on the internet, and listening to music from the 80s. Ava and her husband live in Central California. So Kate and Ava are going to spend a little bit of time talking about Ava's books and all things romance. And then I will be back to open the floor for your questions. So please, as you listen along, get those questions into the chat box so we can ask them afterwards. And do we have a giveaway tonight, Miss Kate?
Yeah, so anyone who asks a question, even if it's not selected for the big screen, will be entered to win some of my merch, as well as get a chance to join the art team for Ava's upcoming secret project that we will talk about later.
Fantastic. So I'm going to pop on off and leave it to the two of you. And then when you see me just mysteriously pop back in, it'll be time for some Q&A. So off you go.
Thanks, Mary.
All right. Goodbye, Mom. Okay. I was a little worried my mom wasn't going to show up in time and I have to run this by myself, but thankfully she is here. So I have to say that, so Ava and I were going through her upcoming releases, and there are a lot of them. So get ready, because we have like just a roller coaster of fun coming up. I'm holding a pen for some reason. Okay, so
you look very official, though.
I have like, this is a very official interview. I mean, did you see my wonderful backdrop?
Right.
I'm very official. Okay, so when I was coming up with questions to ask you, I mean, obviously I'm not known for like being not dirty. Um, so the first question that came to mind was that since you write historicals, primarily historicals, I was wondering what the like I assume you probably read historicals before I ask this question.
Yes, I do.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So everyone's always talking about how in historicals, I think they get more creative with sex scenes than I think contemporary romance tends to, in terms of like locations and carriages on horseback. And I was wondering what the best and or like strangest sex scene you've ever read in historical in terms of like location or just circumstances.
You know, I read one not that long ago where I think the hero and heroine like meet up like literally standing in the middle of the road like and get each other off just in the middle of the road, which I thought was pretty damn awesome. And you know, it is great because there's trying to find privacy is a challenge when you're in historical settings. And so there's a lot of and also you have a lot of clothes on, which are not easy to remove. So you get to be really creative in terms of like your locations as to where these sex scenes are going to happen and how robed or disrobed everyone's going to be. I'm trying to remember. I mean, like there were some pretty bananas ones back in the 80s, and I wish I could remember them, which is funny because at the time I was reading them, I didn't really have a lot of sexual experience. So I was like, wow, you know, this is pretty eye-opening. This is a lot of exciting, and I gotta limber up, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you got older, you're probably like, there's a lot less carriage sex than I thought there was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah, so unless you know there's like back seats of cars, I guess, but it's not quite the same.
No, it's probably maybe the same amount of discomfort though.
Right, exactly. Maybe, I mean, the thing about carriages that would always I get motion sickness really easily, so that would be a problem. But there's a lot of things that I like in theory rather than in practice. That's what fiction is for.
In terms of writing your own, like you brought up, like, you know, all the clothes they have to wear and all like the society rules and stuff. When it comes to writing like your own book, how much research? Like, I'm always in awe of historical romance authors. Like, it, you know, people can write. I mean, all authors are doing amazing work, but historical, you have to basically get like people want correct details most of the time, and like readers will be waiting like to find out like did you use the term petticoat correctly and things like that. And I was wondering how much research did you do going into your first book, and then do you do less research as it goes, or does every book you kind of have to like refresh in terms of, I don't know, the style and things like that?
Right. I mean, my first Regency, because I've been writing historicals, I started writing initially as Zoe Archer, and my first book came out in 2006, and that was Lady X's Cowboy, and that was Victorian. And then I did the Blades of the Rose series, and that required a lot of research because it was not just in terms of the history, but also because it was set in locations all over the world. So I had to do tons and tons of research for that. But when I came to writing the Regency set historicals as Ava Leigh, like I did a lot of research at the onset. And then over the years, there's certain things that I already sort of know, but I'm always checking things like, you know, street names and locations and stuff like that. And there's a lot of things in terms of like the legal system or how to address somebody and things like that that I need refreshers for, which is what's really awesome about the community of writers, because you can ask somebody like, okay, look, if somebody, you know, died and they died without a will, and like, how does, you know, who gets this and that kind of stuff like that. And there are people who know tons. And so you can always ask them a lot of information. So there's a certain amount that's declined in terms of research. But then if I'm looking into a specific area, like in, I'm trying to think if like in like How the Wallflower Was Won, for example, the heroine in that, Tabitha, is a blue stocking intellectual. That's the sequel to the book that Kate's holding right now. So she's an intellectual. So I had to do tons of research because it was a lot about philosophy and social, like the social sciences and things like that. Or in My Fake Rake, for example, where the heroine was a herpetologist and the hero was I guess in the developing field of anthropology. So I needed to kind of like delve into specifics in that. But as far as like Regency society, there's a certain amount that I already know. And I'm also writing a fantasy that's set in a historical setting. So this isn't, you know, and also textbooks are something that, you know, they're like, well, who wrote the textbook? You know, I could get into that and and go on. And but I would like to so there's a part of it sort of like, yeah, it's a little fantastical. It's a little more I don't like I'm writing the stories that I want to write in their historical set. So sometimes people are like, hey, that's not accurate. I'm like, you know, let's have some fun. You know what I mean? So it's like as long as it's
Yeah,
not
we don't really
harmful.
want it to be accurate because like people there'd be like shit in the streets, right? You know, like you
Well,
have
I mean,
to.
exactly. It's like, I mean, the whole historical accuracy thing has been weaponized already in terms of
Mhm.
excluding whose narratives get told. But the fact that we have, you know, tons of dukes with six-pack abs and no venereal disease isn't, you know, I mean, that's a huge ask. So let's have some fun, which is why when I did the Union of the Rake series, it was all based on like, you know, inspired by 80s movies. I mean, that's kind of ludicrous, but it's like, but it's all the 80s stories were all very trope based anyway. So it's like, let's just have some fun and have some joy. You know what I mean? So if you're like there, there are some authors, and I'm so admiring of them that they put the author's notes in the back, you know, and I'm like, are they showing all the research that I did? And I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know if I'm going to do that, but if somebody comes at me, I can try to push back, but I don't really want, you know, it's like, that's not the relationship that I'm trying to enter into. Unless somebody's like, you know, this person or that person wouldn't have their HEA at that time, that I would push back against.
I know Kat Sebastian has had to do that because people come at her a lot with like black men couldn't own businesses, and she'll like pull out like a bunch of research and be like, no, like you're wrong. Or she writes a lot of queer characters as well, so there's a lot of. I feel like she gets a lot of backlash. I read her author notes all the time in her books, and I'm always like, I'm like, oh, like that's really interesting to know that, like, yeah, like so. I imagine when you have research, like as far as your heroines seem to have like amazing careers.
I like to give them interesting jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like when I was reading all of them, I'm like, wow, like they, you know, not that, you know, there's not a place for women whose job is just to be a woman in society and marry rich, and those stories can be told too, but it's definitely fun to read about all the unique careers that you could have back then, even if you were a woman.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of fascinating to me. Like the narratives that appeal to me the most are the ones where people are pushing back against societal expectations. If the character identifies as male or female, or that like there's expectations for both. And I really love it when I see the character sort of like pushing back against that. And those are rather than sort of towing the line. So that to me is the narrative that I'm like most invested in. And that's why I keep returning to that again and again. You know, I've had playwrights, well, the Wicked Quill series, they were all female writers. So I had a woman who was running a gossip newspaper, a playwright, a woman who wrote erotic novels. I had somebody who was a con artist, a smuggler, you know what I mean? So I love giving them a lot of dimensionality in terms of what their ambitions are and their intentions are, and then putting them in an environment where there's a lot of societal structure like pushing back. But one thing I never do is I never have the hero being the one who's saying you can't do that, because to me that's not heroic. I don't like I might write
her.
Yeah, I don't write misogynists as my heroes. Who learn. I'm not interested in their redemption. I want them to, you know what I mean? I'm like, you know, I'd rather see like that's not the narrative where I'm drawn.
So like we talked, so this book is out now. The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes is out now, and then the sequel is going to be out in September. Another one of the Last Chance Scoundrels series. But I want to talk about your anthology coming out in November, which is not a sequel to the anthology here, or the Rake I'd Like to F, which was like wildly popular, but like it's another in the anthology series called Villain I'd Like to F.
Yes,
and
that's right.
So you said like you don't write like misogyny into your heroes and things like that. And I'm curious how, in terms of, now that you have to give us all the details about your villain, I don't know how much of it is written or is privy to the public, but can you tell us a little bit about the story you're writing for Villain I'd Like to F?
Yes.
And what makes them so villainous.
Yeah, exactly. This is really, it's going to be really interesting because it's going to be another 18th century, which I had done in Rake I'd Like to F was also Georgian, which is my favorite era. I love the clothes. I think they're super sexy. And I was also a little wilder and more out there than like the Regency and into the 19th century where societal dictates got narrower and narrower, the strictures. So I was inspired by two things my story for Villain I'd Like to F. I was inspired by the Liaisons Dangereuses, but more specifically Dangerous Liaisons, starring Glenn Close and John Malkovich from I think it was either the late 80s or early 90s. Those two sort of amoral characters. And then I was thinking about, I was watching on Netflix, Too Hot to Handle. Do you know that? Do you know Too Hot to Handle?
I have watched like an episode, I think.
Right. Okay. So
deep dive.
It's pretty crazy, but it has iterations in other countries. So there was a Too Hot to Handle Brazil edition. So the premise for that is like there's all these like horny singles who get put on this retreat, and they think they're there to just kind of like party and hook up, and then they find out no, you're actually on a sex ban, and if you engage in any sexual activity, you get deducted money from this prize. So in Too Hot to Handle Brazil, they had a plot element where two people showed up pretending to be contestants, but they were actually plants from the producers who are there to fuck shit up. So I was like,
I gotta watch this one.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I actually prefer Too Hot to Handle Brazil and Too Hot to Handle Latin. Both of those they're almost better than the English language version, I have to say. But and I'm not really a reality dating show kind of person, but those just really. So anyway, I was like, and these people came in and they had their ulterior motives, and I was just so like Nico Rosso, who's my husband. He's also a romance author, and my plot guru and my beta reader, and it's amazing. So we were talking about it, and we sort of came up with this plot where it was like, what if both characters are both the hero and the heroine are actually villains doing bad, and they're and then they fall for each other. So that I was really excited to try my hand at that, because normally my characters are decent people. Even my rakish ones are really nice guys or nice people. So like writing characters who are kind of like out for themselves that's going to be really great. And I'm also really looking forward to getting two amoral people into bed. I think is going. Yes,
that's always fun.
Yes. Yes, my husband is also a romance author, Nico Rosso. You can find his books on Amazon. He's also a Rita Award nominated author, but he writes across genres. But he was he wrote some romantic suspense, and
that's my favorite.
Yes, you should check him out. So anyway, so it's going to be fun. I mean, we've been thinking the whole anthology series started with Duke I'd Like to F, which was the brainchild of Joanna Shoup, because she knew that people were writing a lot of bananas romances, and she's like, why aren't we seeing more of that in historical? So we Joanna and I got a team together to do the Duke I'd Like to F anthology, which is now, it's not an anthology anymore, but all the stories are available individually. Rake I'd Like to F is out now. And then Villain I'd Like to F, which was Nico's brainchild. He thought of the villain angle. So we're all looking forward to that, just sort of like letting our freak flags fly. And what's really nice is that there's a lot of representation in these historical romances, because we have queer relationships, we have people of color. It's really pretty amazing. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think if you like your sociopaths, which I know you do, Kate, this might be the anthology for you.
Someday these quotes about me are going to be taken very out of context, and people are going to be like, you what? Like, you like sociopaths? And I'll be like, in bed.
That doesn't make it better.
It got worse. I think I am curious. I'm not very up on my historical. What years is the Georgian
The
period?
Georgian period is the 18th century. So it's called that because there were 3 kings named George back to back.
Oh,
George I, George II, and George III. George III, you may know from Hamilton.
I haven't seen Hamilton.
Oh, okay. Well, he's a very it's all right.
Oh wait, no, but he's the guy who plays him is the guy from Mindhunter. In
Jonathan Groff
King
played
George,
him, I think, on Broadway.
I did watch Mindhunter. He was very, very hot. So not as the king though. He was not very hot.
No, as the king, he's kind of ridiculous and also terrible. So,
yeah.
But anyway, the Georgian period is the period in the 18th century with all of the Elizabeth Hoyt books are Georgian. So all of the Maiden Lane books, if you've ever read those. I think Cat Sebastian's the Perfect Crimes of Marion Hayes, and also the Queer Principles of Kit Webb. Those are both Georgian as well.
Oh, so I have been reading them this whole time. I just never knew.
Yes.
Cool.
Sexy clothes. My favorite. I studied a lot of fashion history, and it's my favorite.
I have no frame of reference for. I never picture their clothes. I just assume there's a lot of them. So I'm gonna have to, when this ends, I'm gonna immediately Google Georgian outfits and some context to this.
Yes.
So that's the book you have coming out in November. Villain I'd Like to F, or part of the anthology. There's some big names in that anthology, as well as your own. It's not like a small little anthology of indie authors or anything like that.
No.
These are big names.
Yes, Sierra Simone, Joanna Shupe, Nicola Davidson, and Adriana Herrera. So it's a pretty amazing collection of authors.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I didn't realize there was Duke as well. I guess Duke I'd Like to F. I think I came in at Rake I'd Like to F.
Well, there was Duke I'd Like to F. It was a limited time anthology, but all of the stories that were in it are now available on some of them are on KU, and I think some of them are available elsewhere, but everyone has been published individually. So if you're interested in the stories that got it all started, I have a reverse age gap story called An Education in Pleasure, and that's available on KU, and that's from the Duke I'd Like to F.
It's I'm taking a bunch of notes as we talk. I'm
you read so quickly, Kate. I think we're just trying to keep you stocked.
Seriously, I've met 75% of my reading goal for this year, and my reading goal was 200. So I think I'm at I don't do math, 150 or something, 160.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot of them are novellas, but I got KU when I was breastfeeding, because I was up 5 hours during the night, and I read way too much, and so I'm still just sinking down. I read this yesterday. I'm just all over the place. I was gonna go to your secret project, and I know you can't give us too many details about it.
That's right.
But if you can tell us a little bit about what you have in the works for Halloween 2022.
Yes, I have had an idea in my head literally for over a decade, and it was so out there that I was like, there's nowhere I could publish this. And the zeitgeist caught up to it in terms of just how out there can you get when you're writing romance. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is writing dark mafia, and we were talking about it. I was like, I should put this story out. And I was like, oh my God, with monsters. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, and friends, I should say, I am writing under a new pen name. I've got a book. I will have a book coming out in Halloween, and it's going to be a monster romance. So I'm very excited about it. It's going to be many monsters, one human woman, and that's all the details I can give you, because I want to surprise everybody, and I'm really excited about it. I've been looking forward to writing this for a very long time. So it's going to be pretty out there, but I have to say, I don't think anybody who reads my historical romance is going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe she went there. I mean, I'm totally going there. So be prepared. I told my mom, it's funny, my mom doesn't read my books because she's not really a romance reader, but and she's, she's a boomer, so she, came of age in the 60s, and it's not like she doesn't know what happens, but she cannot read about me writing about sex. And I write about a lot of sex. So I told my mom, I was like, you can't even think about this monster book because you will be so you'll be so upset at the things that your daughter is going to be writing. So
hey, that's like basically a 5-star review right there, though. It's so dirty that your mother cannot read it.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm very excited to let the world know. It's a little daunting because that means I really have to do it, but I'm going to do it. It's happening. So I hope you enjoy my monster book.
I like that you had this in your mind though for like a decade. Like it's just been like stewing in there, and all you had to wait was for all the monster fuckers to like come out of the woodwork.
Right, exactly. And all the people who needed more than one partner, I was like, oh, okay, I'm here for you, my people. So I'm gonna, I'm throwing my hat in the ring.
Yeah, if COVID was good for anything at all, like these quarantines, these lockdowns, it was for letting like people just let their freak flags fly. They were just like, we're going to write whatever we want. We're trapped in the house. We're going to write whatever we want, and we're going to read whatever we want, and we're not going to take shit for it anymore. It was basically like the romance novel reader mantra of 2020 to 2022.
Well, I think, starting from 2016 on, we're like, wow, this world sucks. Let's get our joy where we can, because there's so much out there that's horrendous. And it's like, I need a space. I need somewhere to go for just a little while where I'm safe and I can have fun. And, going into that freak space is, and I say that with all love, that's something that we need. That's what romance provides,
Yeah, I know actually, I've heard from a lot of people that these last 2 years, especially, they've really struggled with reading contemporary romance.
Right.
That like, even though there's, and most authors have kind of shied away from any mention of quarantines or COVID or pandemics and anything like that. But I know that people are still like, I can't, like the modern world is shit right now, and I cannot read a book set in it. And so, yeah, they really just like flocked to people who never would have thought they would have picked up a monster book. We're just like, let's do it. And now they're as depraved as the rest of us, which is really great, I think.
Right, exactly.
Weirdly, I only started reading monster romance I think really while I was breastfeeding. Like thanks to my baby. But I got KU, and that I just like started like binging them all. So I'm wondering, what is a monster romance that you've read recently, or just one that you've really enjoyed that kind of you would recommend to your readers or the people watching this? Or
well, my two sort of gateway monster romances were Morning Glory Milking Farm, and which I was like, this is just really good, and it's awfully sweet and tender, considering that it's about hand jobs for minotaurs. Yeah. And then also I really liked A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, because I was just the sort of historical and mythological things kind of folded in together, and I really enjoyed that a lot.
I have them both on my shelf right now. I agree with you. They are amazing. Yeah. Like, isn't it so weird how like I'll recommend like C.M. Nascasta's Morning Glory Milking Farm as like Hallmark meets jerking off a minotaur. Like,
right. Well,
I mean, it's so sweet.
But the town is so sweet, and the people are and then it also has some really interesting things to say about capitalism.
Yeah,
and it's like, how did they do that? It's amazing.
It was like Hallmark and anti-Hallmark and monster fucking like all in one go, basically,
which is a pretty fantastic synthesis. So I've got to, I tip my hat to that, to be able to do that in a way that is engaging and not didactic. You know what I mean? And it was successful in that regard.
Yeah, those are two really, really good recs. I think my mom is about to pop back in. We've hit 30. She's usually pretty strict about this, cutting me off.
How did you know? In addition to just having raced from the plane, I also, for whatever reason, my keyboard is like lagging. So I'm typing as fast. So I was just typing, getting ready to pop in, and it was still on the GE when you said that. So
that's because we're in tune to each other.
we are. Well, I think everybody has completely enjoyed this conversation. And
all the moms are fucking, probably.
Well, what's not to enjoy? So Michaela wants to know, what was your gateway into historical romance? And did you answer this already?
I have not answered that question.
Okay.
I wish I could say specifically which book, because I don't remember. But I started reading romance novels probably when I was about 14 or 15, and that was in the mid 80s. So a lot of the authors that I was reading included Jude Devereaux, Judith McNaught, Iris Johansen. I'm trying to remember all of the authors, Laverle Spencer, like her historicals specifically. So, and I read a lot of the time travel ones by Constance O.J. Banyan, I think was her name. I can't remember. I mean, like the covers that you recall from the 80s, like I was reading all of those rather, with the colors and the horses and things like that. I Joanna Lindsay, and I was reading all of that stuff. So I remember that was what, and I was reading some contemporaries, but historical was always the one that really got me more than more interested more than the contemporaries. I was always just kept gravitating toward that.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our question from the Bushcraftsman, whose wife loves historic and historical fiction, but he'd love for her to get into some good historical romance. So how should he go about it? What would you recommend he hands her to start with?
Well, I mean, he could hand her an Ava Leigh book.
Right. I mean, just saying. And there's so many really good historical romance. There's so many good authors out there. Alexis Hall's A Lady for a Duke just came out.
Oh, so
phenomenal, good. Unbelievable. Cat Sebastian, Adriana Herrera's historical just came out. I would definitely recommend that. God, I'm like looking at my Lisa Kleypas is a very popular author, and she's so good. And also, I've if I can name drop, I've met her, and she's literally like the nicest person on the planet, just the kindest, so sweet. I'm trying to remember. Julianne Long is a wonderful historical romance author. Her voice is phenomenal, so I would recommend her. I think always when somebody asks for book recommendations, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but then all of a sudden all the things kind of flow out of my mind.
Completely. Yeah. Completely. If somebody doesn't want to know, but I just have a conversation with somebody and books I think they need to read comes up, I can't stop. But if they actually ask me the question.
Right.
But hey, Cat Sebastian was a great recommendation, because we will have her on next month on Blaze Boudoir. Yeah. So Bushcraftsman, tune in next month and you can get some more recommendations there.
Oh, Bushcraftsman, I would also recommend Vanessa Riley. Is a wonderful historical romance author. I need to recommend her more because she's fantastic.
Excellent. And our friend Margaret would like to know, besides the HEA requirement, is there a fundamentally different structure for romance versus other genres?
To be frank, I don't think so. I think the HEA is really the most, is the one requirement that needs to be met. I think this notion, sometimes genre romance, often people call it formulaic, and it's like, well, storytelling itself is kind of formulaic. It does follow act structure and things like that. But other than that, no, I mean, you really just kind of let it, unfold as the story tells itself to you. So I would say that, structurally speaking, you can really do almost whatever you want. I've seen story narratives that have extensive flashback sequences, or they're told sort of in dual timelines. I've seen single perspective. I've seen close. I've seen first person. It's like all of these things are pretty open. So I would say you can pretty much go wherever you like, as long as there's an HEA. There are certain things, like some people are like, a hard stop is like infidelity within the narrative framework of the romance. So if one character sleeps with somebody who's not the other, like the love interest, that might be kind of a turnoff for some people. But that's really more content than structure, I would say.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So the Bushcraftsman has a great question. Have you and Nico written a book together, or would you consider it? Or maybe you co-write, where you write the female and he writes the male characters?
Well, we do collaborate very closely on my books together. I mean, I'm the one who writes it, but when it comes to the plotting, and he also, I get notes from my editor and from him. So it is a very close relationship, but and he's a little more independent when he writes his own books. But we have written a steampunk series together. The books themselves were not written collaboratively. I wrote them as Zoe Archer and he was Nico Rosso, and it was called The Ether Chronicles for Avon Impulse. So I wrote a book, then he wrote a book, then I wrote a book. And so it was all set in the same world, but we didn't write them together. I think that probably for the sake of our relationship, writing a book together might not be the same book together, might not necessarily be the right thing to do. And we have very distinctive voices. So I want to make sure that they're clear and it doesn't get too jumbled. I think he would agree with me on that. So we're probably going to retain the relationship that we have with our process staying the way it is.
Not worth the risk.
No, and we've been together a very long time, and I don't really want to undermine that.
Yeah, that's fair. You know what works for your relationship.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't think I could not write anything with my husband at all.
I think that would be difficult. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those are all the questions, and I know we want to talk real quickly. Ava is going to be part of the next, it's December 2022, that we will see the Best Women's Erotica of the Year, Volume 8, coming out in December, and Ava will be part of that.
Yes.
And we've got some pre-order information in there as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about your pre-order books?
Well, I have a bunch of books available for pre-order right now. I have How the Wallflower Was Won, which is the next book in my Last Chance Scoundrels historical romance series for Avon. I have The Villain I'd Like to F. I also have, as Maya Silver, I will have Wild Abandon, which will be my monster romance. And then in December, you're going to see the Best Women's Erotica, Volume 8. I don't know how many. I think I may be one of the few historical entries in there. Most of them are contemporary, but they're all written by some phenomenal authors, brought together by the editor. Very excited to be a part of that anthology. So it's going to be kind of a busy fall and into the winter for me. And I hope to see you all there following me. Yes.
Absolutely.
Someone did ask when the cover is going to be released for How the Wallflower Was Won.
The cover is on, I just don't have it in front of me, but the cover for How the Wallflower Was Won is already up. You can find it, I think it should be on my website, but you can find it on Amazon or any of your favorite book e-tailers. I think it's even still up on NetGalley if you are a reviewer. So that cover is up. The cover for Villain I'd Like to F will be revealed in the middle of June.
Excellent. Excellent.
Wow. I learned so much tonight.
I think we all did. Thank you so much for joining us, Ava. This was a wonderful discussion. I loved seeing all the comments as the two of you were chatting. And
yeah, there were quite a few comments.
Nice.
Pre-order any one of those books. Check out Ava's husband, Nico Rosso. Check out his books as well. Pre-order any one of these.
There's a lot.
Yeah. Stay tuned at the holidays for the best women's erotica of the year, because that is the perfect gift for the romance reader in your life.
Absolutely. There's something for everybody.
Absolutely. And again, I would ask, if you enjoyed this conversation, that you would find a Mighty Blaze anywhere that you're watching. Like our pages, subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a follow, and sign up for our newsletter so that you never miss an event. And Kate, are we going to contact the winner of the raffle after the broadcast?
Yeah, I'll reach out to them personally.
Excellent. So stay tuned. Somebody is going to win an amazing bunch of raffle prizes. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Blaze Boudoir. We will see you next month with Kat Sebastian. And on behalf of Ava and Kate and myself, we are so happy that you joined us tonight and hope you have a wonderful evening. Thanks again. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you.